Hi, everybody. It's time for another In-Ring Wrestling podcast. Along with Casey Thompson, I'm Kevin Kelly. We thank you so much for all the subscribers and all the views and all the downloads and everybody who's been coming on board. The numbers have been great, Casey, and you have been instrumental in that growth. I thank you for coming up with this whole concept of the In-Ring Wrestling podcast, and what a time you had this past weekend. We'll get into that and a whole lot more, but again, getting back to your roots and getting back to seeing some of the legends that helped you get to where you got to in the wrestling industry had to be great.
Absolutely. It was the fifth year Legends Lunch Reunion in Tampa, Florida. So, I started off the day, I picked up that I've spoken before, Bugsy McGraw, that broke me into the business. So I drove to get him. He's 80 years old. And
God bless
him. But what a sharp guy. I mean, just the stories that we were talking about he was just talking about everything. And he can remember all the stories just like it was yesterday. I mean, his mind's better than mine. I'm like, but he talked about everything. So we get to the Legends Luncheon, and you got a bunch of Hall of Famers. You got Jerry Briscoe was there. You had one of the Killer Bees, Brian Blair, Mr. B, Brian Blair. He's the host of it, and that's his thing. He's also the president of the Cauliflower Alley Club that does a lot of good for a lot of wrestlers that need help. Haku was there, from my list.
Yes.
Which I had a great conversation with him about that, so we'll get into that. And a good friend of mine, Joe Gomez, he was there. You had, there was probably about 150 people. Ronnie Garvin was there.
Oh, wow.
They were doing honoring Leilani Kai and Wendy Richter. And I always thought it was like they just honor people from Florida, and I didn't realize that's where Wendy Richter got her start, was in Florida. And
know that.
Brian Blair was talking about it. He's like, she's like the first female wrestler that really shattered the glass, and blew up, which she did. She was on mainstream with Cyndi Lauper and everything like that. So it was big for the wrestling business. So then there was this who's who of people there. It was just such a great time, and got to just meet with people that I wrestled with, and I didn't realize that I was so young compared to everyone.
Yeah.
I'm like, guys that because I started so young wrestling, and there's guys there that I'm like, hey, how old are you now? Oh, I'm 67. I'm like, what? You're 67? I'm like, I thought I'm 52. I thought we were around the same age, but no, I guess I was just a kid still. But yeah, it was a great time. A lot of good stories. I guess you're always a mark for wrestling. Even though we've been in the business and everything, we're still marks. There's guys there I watched growing up, So it was a really fascinating time, and it's nice that everyone was equal. You can go up and just talk to everyone. And so I had a really good conversation with Haku about our top 5 WCW toughest guys during
he probably agreed with me that my list of WF guys was tougher, and Haku probably apologized, and yeah, I understand. No, so just to review now, Haku was your number 1 toughest guy. You also had Rick Rude, Dick Slater, the Barbarian, and
Paul
Orndorff. That was your top 5.
Yeah.
What did Haku tell me about the conversation with Haku? How did it go?
So I was telling him about it. He's like, who was on your list? I'm like, well, I had, Barbarian. He's like, oh. I said, yeah, He's like, and then he started, veering off a little. He's like, oh man, he says, we had really good times back then, back when we did like the Disney tapings and stuff like that. Because we're able, he's like, there's no scripts like there are now. We just went out there and had fun and just wrestled. He says, and we always got to make fun of Barb because he couldn't talk right and everything. They're always making fun of Barb. So, so he's like, oh, Barbarian. He's like, oh, you okay? Oh, yeah, yeah. And then I'm like, I said, Rick Rude. And he's like, which is a surprise to me. But,
Yeah.
This is the ultimate tough guy. So he has his own opinion like everyone else does. And then I said, Dick Slater. And he's like, and then I said, Paul Orndorff. And I said, of course, you're the top one. And he's like, well, to be honest, he says, if you know the true history of old school wrestling, he says, the toughest guy that was ever in the business was Dick Slater. Which
Wow.
I was like, I knew Dickie was always tough because there was a story that when Wahoo had the book, it must have been in the Florida, I think it was the Florida territory. Somehow Wahoo's gun went off and it shot Dickie in the leg, right? And Dickie had to wrestle this match before he went to get it taken care of.
Wait, he wrestled a match with a bullet in his leg?
Yeah,
That's tough.
yeah. I mean, so, but he was telling me about that, and so it was really cool. And then we were like, we were talking about how we wrestled in a tag team match once, and he's like, "Oh, you go tag you." He told my partner, "You tag brother, you come in and hot tag." He says, "Come in, all kinds of fire, big baby face, boom, 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 just go, go crazy." And I'm like, "Okay." And he's like, "What?" I said, "Haku, you don't sell for anyone. What am I gonna do?" And he's like, "Oh, no. It'll be okay. It'll be okay, brother. I will sell for you." So I came in, hot tag, and you can see it. I'm in there, boom, 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 kicking, punching, chopping, and he's just laughing at me. And finally just cuts me off, and they finish it off and everything. But
That's
but it was really good to sit there. I got to talk to Jerry Briscoe for a little while. And Jerry was always a really, he's a former amateur wrestler, a
yes.
real shooter. He wrestled for Oklahoma State, both him and his brother. Jack was a national champion. Jack actually won, well, I think his junior year of college. He never got scored on. He never got taken off his feet. This is in Division I wrestling, which is unheard of, especially for these days now. And he won the national championship. So I mean, he was talking because Jerry's met my son many years ago, like probably when my son was maybe 10 years old, and he's always kept in contact with him throughout the years, which I thought was like a really cool thing to do. And he's like, "Yeah, your dad used to wrestle for me," and it's all this kind of stuff, which is cool. Put me over for my kid and all that. And and my son just graduated from the police academy,
Hey,
and
congratulations.
he's on the top of the class. And so he's like,
Of
"Ah,
course.
please tell Chase congratulations and thank you for your service and all that." So it was really cool. It was a good time. And then of course with Bugsy, um, and Joe was sitting there, and we was just talking about, Joe's Ric Flair's best friend, so he's always with Nate all the time. So we get to hear all the stories, and it was just um, Billy Silverman, which was a referee for. Did he
Oh, I know
wrestle?
Billy
He
well.
refereed in WWF, right? Yeah,
Yeah, he
Billy was
did.
there. Like I said, Ronnie Garvin was there. It was a really fascinating time, and they keep it exclusive just to people that were in the business. So there's not like any fans and stuff like there, which we have nothing against them. Is just this is a time they want to have a special time just for the boys, the people that are in the business, and they get to celebrate it together, and just get to not have to worry about anything. So it was a good time. It was really, really a good time.
That's awesome. I think I need to join the Cauliflower Alley Club. It's been gnawing at me. Bob Cook
Yes, we
brought it
are.
up. We need to, and that's going to be a big thing. When you talk about these legends and the Legends Lunch, and especially honoring Leilani Kai, who I don't think gets enough credit for her work in the industry. I don't know if there is any more active member of the wrestling alumni community, active on social media with memories and stories and pictures like Leilani Kai had.
Oh,
Coming
wow.
up in the business, she always had her camera going, and took pictures of so many moments, and has gotten pictures from photographers from all over the world for in-ring action and things like that. She's had what an amazing story. Came up from, foster home situation, and always wanted to be in wrestling. And I followed her story. She, went to Mulas, as so many girls did, and broke into
Wow.
business that way, and was immediately sent to Japan, and was wrestling over in Japan, and was wrestling in all the territories. They were making no money, Casey. They were making $25.
And I believe the money they were making, Moolah was taking a lot of it, right?
She would take her cut, and before the money would be handed to the talent. So before the envelope was filled, Moolah was getting hers, and they also had to work at Moolah's restaurant for free while they were training in South Carolina.
You talk about paying your dues, huh?
You paid your dues
over and over and over.
It got you to where you wanted to go, and
right.
her relationship with Moolah got contentious at times as the years went on. Moolah is Moolah, and you can say whatever you want about her. Okay, the history books will write themselves in that regard. But as far as Leilani Kai is concerned, I think that she's a great historian, and just coming back from having a hip replacement, and
she was walking a little slow still.
Yeah, just what a beautiful soul, and just the stories that she shares, and the way she's come up. I follow her all the time, and I'm a huge fan, and I've watched so much of her stuff from Japan. My goodness. They put the top title on her in Japan, 1988, which didn't happen a lot, and, as a foreigner. And they put the top women's title on her, and it was a big deal. It was a big freaking deal. And that was, she also won the women's championship in the WWF and was a tag team champion with Judy Martin. Had a run as the Glamour Girls, which a lot of people might remember. But her career beyond the WWF or outside the WWF was equal to, if not greater, because what she did in Japan superseded her success from a notoriety standpoint. Because women's wrestling in Japan was as hot, at different times as the, because she was there for the Crush Girls. She was there for the Jumping Bomb Angels. She was there for the rise of these, and her and Judy were instrumental in getting these girls ready to go and making sure that they knew how to work and making sure that they knew how to do all the things that you have to do as a wrestler. So her influence, Judy Martin's influence on wrestling as a whole, and especially in Japan, huge. And Wendy Richter was by her side because Leilani was a little older, and Judy Martin was, they were equals. But Wendy Richter was kind of the young girl and was doing, working underneath match and then be in her corner. So she got to see a lot. It's just fascinating. I love all that stuff. Okay, so Jerry Briscoe, did you double leg dive him? Did you try to take him down? I want to know that story.
He didn't get up. He just stayed behind the table. So,
damn it.
But yeah, I do have a good story to share with you.
Okay.
So in the car ride, I would throw different names at Bugsy and just see what his response was and stuff like that. So I said, hey, did you have a lot of dealings with, we were talking about Puerto Rico, and then I mentioned about Invader, and he's like, so I said, hey, did you have a lot of, dealings with Bruiser Brody? He's like, yeah. He's like, well, we were over in Australia for a while. He says in Florida, he says, I understand what happened with Invader and Jose Gonzalez. I guess we have to say allegedly. No, or I guess he did. He just got away with it. Yeah, he stabbing Bruiser Brody, which led to his death. And he was like, yeah, I see. He says, Bruce, he says, Frank, he said he was a bully, and he would just, he says, they flew him in for a show in Miami, and Bugsy was like, got to the dressing room, the building early, walked in, and, Brody was in there, and he's like, oh, hey, Frank, how you been? I haven't seen you in a while. And he looked at him and said, oh, you're still alive, huh? You're not dead yet. He's like, he was just a real bully. And, it's like, okay, am I going to jump on him, or are we going to, he's like, so I just looked at him and like, yeah, I'm still alive. And they just went their ways and stuff like that. But he was saying that he would always bully people, and which actually makes sense to a lot of the stuff. So maybe that's what happened to, you heard the old story about when Lex Luger was wrestling him in a steel cage and just, you know what, I'm out of here, just hopped over the top and left.
That was it.
Left the ring. But he was insinuating that, yeah, I'm not surprised that it happened, because he would just push. And he said probably, Jose Gonzalez just had enough and was like, yeah, done. Over it.
Well, in New York, when Brody was getting his push up there, he completely jobbed out Jose Gonzalez and just squashed him. And I don't think the match was supposed to go like that, but that's the way the match went. This was many years before the 1988 meeting in the shower that led to Brody's death, as we said. So did it go all the way back to then, to the mid-'70s? Did it go, had it been part of the recent tour, there were some overtures that Brody was trying to make moves to buy into the territory. There were a lot of business things that were happening behind the scenes, and it could have been any number of reasons. But again, when you have a resource like Bugsy McGraw, who at 80 years old is still sharp as a tack and is able to tell these stories. So you drove, Bugsy's over on the East Coast, and you drove him all the way to Tampa?
Yeah, he's in Daytona Beach, so he's about 2 hours from me. So I drove to get him, and then from there we drove 3 hours to Tampa, and then we went back another 3 hours back, and then I went another 2 hours back home. And the funny thing, we got there, and he's getting all of his stuff. He's and I'm not making fun, but I love Bugsy to death. He's great. I had to help him a little bit. Like he was my grandfather or something.
Mm-hmm.
Total respect. He's like, hey, you're gonna have to help me here. I was like, whatever you need, Bugs, I got you. So I had to help take his boots off. He has these custom-made gold boots that he wears in there, and cowboy boots. So I had to
I saw
take
the
his boots off.
I saw the pictures. Those things were, you could see them from across the room.
And they're huge. They come all the way up to his knee and everything, I'm like, I gotta get my hands on those one day.
Yeah, you need to get those. I want to see that.
Yeah. So, and I helped put his sneakers on and everything, which, I'm more than happy to. So we get to he has a nice condo right in Daytona, right on the beach, beautiful high rise. And so he's fiddling around getting some stuff, and he's getting money out, and I'm doing like, so he turns around to give me some money. He's like, here. I'm like, no. He's like, yes. I'm like, no. I said, yes. I said, I don't want your money. I don't need your money. He says, yeah, but you put gas in your car. I said, I don't care, Bugsy. I said, it was it was an honor for me to do this. I said, I think that's what we're missing a lot with the newer generation of guys. I don't think I was thinking the other day, and I'm like, part of the developmental territory is they should have to take like classes to learn the history of wrestling, to see who paved the way for them to have the life that they have, being a superstar now. Learn the stuff. Like, I drove hours out of the way and it's kind of selfish on my own part, because I wanted to sit there and talk to him and hear about the old days. And, he started back from 1959, started telling me stories, So
you didn't
it was
realize when I was, a fan in the 70s and 80s, I didn't realize that Bugsy McGraw had that legendary, right? Because he wasn't Bugsy McGraw. He was Brutus and had a different name and a different look. You didn't realize he went back and wrestled in, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. 5 decades of wrestling. That's a hell of a career.
Yeah. And after he got out of wrestling, he went back to school and become an RN. He got a nurse. And he worked at a Trauma One center in Tampa General. So he's like, I saw shootings, you name it. We saw it every single night. He said, I loved it. I loved being right there with all the action and everything. So I got to the point, I'm like, Bugsy, I guess we're gonna fight over this money, because I'm not taking it. He's like, oh, all right, kid. He's like, I think you'll be able to get me this time, so I'm just gonna keep it for right now. I said, Bugsy, when I first started, Bugsy lived in St. Pete. I lived in Orlando. So we're talking 2.5 hour drive. He used to come to the guy that trained me, Jerry Gray, and Jerry had a big 20 by 20 ring in his backyard. And Bugsy used to come there on the weekends when we weren't working, to work with me and two other guys, two brothers, John and Scott Allen. They're both gone now. And so I'm like, Bugsy, I said, it's me just repaying what you did for me. I said, I wouldn't take your money. I said, I appreciate it. It was just an honor to do it. And the funny thing is, on Facebook and all the social media, all these other wrestlers were so appreciative that I brought him, because he hasn't been there in a couple of years, because, he doesn't drive as much anymore and stuff like that. So I said, hey, you know what? I said, everyone they go, I said, I'll pick you up and we'll go. Let's, because I'm just gonna start writing down all my things I want to know about everyone.
Yeah. And again, I think that that's so good for you to be able to connect the dots in your career and
Right.
to pay back, to give back to those that helped you get there. Like you were saying, I'm a big believer in that servant heart, and I'm always like, let's serve first and ask. We're never going to ask for anything. We're going to get it tenfold. I just think that's amazing that you did that and had that
No, I did the
experience.
same thing with Blackjack Mulligan and
Yeah.
Kevin Sullivan. So I used to drive a Blackjack. Kevin, I used to go pick him up down in the Keys, and I mean, Joe Gomez were talking about it, and I said, yeah, you should stay at his guest house he had. He's like, oh my gosh, wasn't that guest house just the greatest? And the way his wife Linda had it all decorated. I said, oh, it was great. We used to stay there and go into the water and snorkel and go on the boat and stuff like that. But people are like, why are you driving all the way down there to pick him up? And I'm like, why wouldn't I? It's the devil. It's Kevin Sullivan, you know, one of the greatest minds ever in professional wrestling. And I got his undivided attention for a 2 hour, 3 hour car ride. So you know what? That means he has unless he's not going to talk at all, he has nothing but to talk to me about. And you know what? The first rule of wrestling is to sit down and keep your mouth closed and ears open. And that's how you learn. Yeah, exactly. Zip it. That's how you learn the business. And that's how I learned a lot of the psychology of the business was from just sitting there talking to these older guys in the business that I watched growing up, and I know what they've done in the business and the money they drew. That's how they talk about, oh, I'm over this and that. Well, how much money have you drew? You know, and Bugsy was talking about how he sold out Madison Square Garden with Bruno. He had Bruno in the garden. He was talking about, you heard the story where in the Boston Garden where Blackjack Mulligan got stabbed by someone, right? And ended up getting like 100 stitches in his leg. Well, after he got to the hospital, home from the hospital, he had to go right back to the hospital because his leg started blowing up. Well, they didn't realize the guy that stabbed him had dipped a knife into pig fat to get it infected. So it infected his leg. Blackjack almost lost his leg. And he was talking about the Boston Garden was such a brutal, and they started off at the top and they had to walk down the I guess the stairs, bleachers or whatever to get to the ring. And the police they had their batons and their riot hats on. And they're like, all right, when we say go, and the whole way they put the shields down and they took the sticks and was beating people all the way to the ring. And he was talking about different riots and stuff like that. How he would purposely like to start riots because it was just fun to do it as a heel. He said one time 6 people got him actually, and they had him. He was laying on his belly with his legs, and they had both his legs in the ring posts, like nutting him, right? And he's like, you'll be amazed what your body can do when you have all the adrenaline. Because I'm like, they're going to kill me, you know. And so I ended up getting up, and so I got crazy, went after them, and they scattered and everything. But I mean, it's just like endless stories for hours at a time, and it was just like I was like a kid in a candy store, you know.
The idea of bringing all those legends together, I'm sure, is good. So the basic kind of the format of the day, if there was one, Bugsy, I saw, got up and sat and I'm sure told some stories. Were other people sharing, or was everybody just
Yeah,
sort of milling about?
no, he got up. All pretty much all the legends there got up and just said a couple words. Brian Blair, he's that's his baby. He's the head of it. Of course, they really pushed the Cauliflower Alley Club, which is like we said is a great thing. And I think maybe we should make a trip out there to Vegas the next one. I think that would
Agreed.
be a go out there and Bugsy talked. Let's see. Yeah, a bunch of the guys talked. It was just and then they have um the the honorees, which like we said was Wendy Richter and Leilani Kai, and an old one of Bob Cook's best friends. She's actually, I believe, married to Chris Collins, which is a wrestler, was one of Kevin Sullivan's guys back in the day. Her name is Penelope Paradise. She did the stuff for Leilani Kai, which was like about a half hour. I remember she used to ride with us going to TV whenever she could, right? We did WCW, and I was like a young 18-year-old kid. And so I'm literally was the kid. And she's just talking, 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 talking. And I looked, I said, "Do you ever shut up?" And she just wouldn't stop talking. So I brought that up. She's like, "Oh, yeah, 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 that's just like me." And it sure was because she just talks, talks, talks. It was funny. And it was good to see a lot of those people, old friends and stuff like that. And I'm excited they're having one again on Saturday, May 3rd. So we're back at it again.
Fantastic, fantastic. Now, I know, of course, that Florida has been a retirement home, if you will, for a lot of great old wrestlers because of the warm weather and the water. A lot of folks have retired down to Florida, so it's almost the perfect setting to be able to have these legends lunches to get together because there's so many great legends that live in the Sunshine State, if you will. That's a perfect spot. And just so everybody knows, like Haku is the father of part of the bloodline in WWE right now. He is the father, Haku is the father of Tama Tonga, Tongaloa, and Hikuleo, who has yet to debut in WWE. I knew them all, of course, from New Japan, where Haku spent a lot of years and was very close with Tiger Hattori, who also spent a lot of years in Florida. And so I've known Haku for a long, long time. I know his sons very well. So when you think about the current product, there are some connections to some of the folks that you saw yesterday, particularly Haku, and of course Jerry Briscoe, who's instrumental in that pipeline of so many great amateurs. Why did Brock Lesnar come to the WWE? Why did Shelton Benjamin come to the WWE? Amateur wrestling background, because Jerry Briscoe, as an amateur champion, had carte blanche to go and help recruit these guys and to bring them in.
From what I hear, the story was when Briscoe, I think he had a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
And Vince was like, you'll always be on whatever you want to do, you'll always be on the payroll. We're always going to take care of you. What do you want to do? He said, what I really would like to do is I'd like to go to all the amateur wrestling events and recruit top level, Division I, Olympic level, world champion wrestlers for the business. And that's where I met him with my son many years ago. We were at Ohio State for a big tournament. They had the NCAA National Division I National Duels. At the same time, we had a big national kids tournament going on, and he was there recruiting. And he's recruited Shelton Benjamin. He recruited Brock Lesnar. He recruited, which I still am trying to figure this out because he's probably one of the most athletic big guys I've ever seen in my life, which was Gable Stevenson.
Yes.
He recruited Chad Betts, which is Chad Gable. He recruited him. He was the London Games. What was that, 2001? He was an Olympian for Greco-Roman wrestling.
Is that 04?
Yeah, 04, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He was it wasn't 04, it was 2012.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, London Games was 2012. He was a Greco-Roman wrestler. He got recruited by him. So
Otis was another guy that was recruited by Jerry Briscoe because he was an amateur
Jerry
champion.
Always liked, they call any amateur wrestler, especially at a high level, they were shooters. They're the real shooters, and so that was Jerry's thing. So I mean, there's the current product goes all the way back to where I was this weekend. Has ties to it.
And Charlie Haas was another one, of course. I met them first. I met the Haas brothers first, and I brought them to Jerry. And Jerry was, because they both wrestled at Seton Hall. And Russ and Charlie were amateur greats. They were from Oklahoma. And they'd also taken gymnastics classes. They had clear designs on becoming professional wrestlers. So they had the amateur background, They had the flexibility and flying ability from being gymnasts, and also just had a toughness about them. And when you look at them, you could see right away that the Haas brothers were the real deal because they were tough as nails.
You have Shelton Benjamin. He was an amateur wrestler. He actually was a coach of Brock Lesnar. You have who's the other one in the Hurt Syndicate? Not MVP.
Oh, Bobby Lashley. How could we forget Lashley?
He wrestled Division 3 or Division 2. I mean, and all these guys that have a wrestling background, they all go back to getting recruited by Jerry Briscoe.
I read something this past week where people were wondering why NXT might not be turning out as the numbers or whatever, and what's missing. And again, everything is good with NXT, and they're developing a lot of great talent. But I said to myself as I read this article, Jerry Briscoe isn't out recruiting anymore. He's not going. Yeah.
Track stars.
Sure.
They're recruiting different basketball players, all this stuff. And he recruited strictly amateur wrestlers, shooters. And look at the track record. It's proven to, we've mentioned, all those guys, and they've all, made it to a enormous level.
When you look at what Jerry Briscoe has done for the wrestling industry, it was, and what Jack did, and I know that we just recently passed the 15-year mark, the 15th anniversary of Jack Briscoe's passing. And Jack, of course, as a two-time former NWA champion and the amateur great, three-time high school champion, two-time NCAA champion, like Casey, like you said, unscored upon his junior year, and made that transition into the pros. And back in the day, back in Briscoe's era, Dory Funk's era, when you looked at what was modeled, let's say, the man's man, the all-American man, he looked like Jerry Briscoe. He looked like Jack Briscoe. He looked like Jerry Briscoe. He looked like Dory Funk. That was the athlete of the day that was celebrated in the mainstream press when you talked about, legitimate athletes, but they were soft-spoken. They were not flamboyant. They were just true all-American boys. And just the background from Jerry Briscoe, where they came up, again, as Native Americans and didn't have much. And it's just fascinating. And a cool story with me and Jerry, when I started in WWF in 96, and at the first TV taping I was at, I met Jerry and shook his hand, and he said, Florida guy, we got to stick together. That was the first thing he said to me. So we were always very close, and I love Jerry so much. He was instrumental, too, in helping secure Randy Orton as well, even though Randy didn't come from the amateur ranks. But again, a lot of those conversations were through Jerry Briscoe. So
right.
When you look at what you saw at this Legends lunch, how many try to guess, because everybody was in the business 30, 40 years, right? You just were there with, 1,000 years of collective wrestling experience in this one room?
Like Joe Malenko was there. He's in his 60s. He said he's going up in a week or two to OVW to do a clinic. Santana, which was a producer for WWE, and then the Cuban Assassin, David Sierra.
Of course.
He was there, which he, wrestled in all the territories, Oregon, Florida, So, it was like a who's who. It was just like, it was, if you're in the wrestling business and you're in Florida and you haven't been, you should really go, pay homage to all the greats who paved the way for what you did and everyone else has done. It's a very humbling experience and to be a part of it.
I wonder, too, with so many guys down in Florida and NXT being right there, the Performance Center being, in the north part of Orlando, it would seem to me very easy to set up, a day to bring Bugsy over and to have him just sit and tell stories. And whether the trainees, whether the athletes of today understand it, you talked about learning the history of the business. Somebody's going to get something out of it. Football does it all the time. They bring back alumni, and they
Really?
just have them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they just have them sit and we'll talk in meeting rooms, especially at the college ranks. Hey, here was a great, he played here, and so we've got him to come and talk. And a lot of times it's, save your money and, keep the bad people out of your life and this and that. But sometimes they'll get down and they'll, depending on the physical capabilities of who they bring in, they'll go and have him walk the practice field and technique and what did you learn here and what about this? Oh, you could place your hand here. You could go around him this way. So many little nuggets of information can be passed down. When I spent time with Curtis Hughes recently, Mr. Hughes, he lives in Atlanta and he's training guys. I said, why doesn't WWE have you come down and be a guest trainer for a week? When you hear about his background, he was an NCAA college football star. He was a heavily recruited athlete in Kansas. He lived in Kansas City, Kansas, and Iowa had paid him money. And this was before the days of NIL. They gave him the bag, and Curtis Hughes was a heavily recruited defensive lineman, and he was going to Iowa. He said he went to a game at Iowa his senior year of high school, and they had him not in the box, where it was warm, but rather standing on the field.
Yeah.
And he's freezing. And he's like, I can't bring my mom here to watch me play games if she's going to be freezing on the sidelines having to watch. So he went back home. And it's like, I think I'm going to change my mind here. And she's like, well, where are you going to go? And he had offers from Kansas. He had offers from every major, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma. Every Big 8 school at the time was making overtures to get Curtis Hughes to play football there. And he settled. He's like, I wanted to stay close to home, but I didn't want to be that close to home, Kevin. I said, I get you. So he went to Manhattan, Kansas, and he went to Kansas State. And he was a Wildcat. And this is in the days of the wishbone offense and a 5-2 defense. So he was the anchor in the middle as the nose guard. There was the nose guard, there were 2 tackles and 2 ends. And he was the man responsible for taking on, trying to get that double team. And he was trying to break through, and he would take on the fullback, who was the first option in the wishbone in that triple option offense. So he's running against a 240-pound guy like this every single time, whether he had the ball or not. Then, if he didn't have the ball, he had to try to get down the line to stop the quarterback, and then eventually, if the pitch was made, he'd have to get out wide. He was so quick, he could get there. He could run sideline to sideline as a 260-pound nose guard, same as Ron Simmons at Florida State. So it's just fascinating to see, and it's like, you guys should take advantage of this, WWE. You're doing everything else right. Just do this. And I think they're doing a fantastic job, as we've said, honoring these legends and having them appear, at big events like we just saw at the Royal Rumble. So I think that's awesome. Now, okay, so what was something, did Bugsy tell you something that surprised you? Did he have some takes on some guys that kind of caught you off guard?
He had an opinion on anyone I mentioned. Like I used to love Bugsy when he was in Charlotte territory, and when him and Jimmy Valiant, Boogie Woogie Man, Jimmy Valiant were a tag team, And I said, so what do you think of Jimmy Valiant? Nope, don't like him. Never did.
Wow.
He said he was in business for himself. He didn't pull no punches. He was a straight shooter about everything. He did say that that when he was in told me a story, he was wrestling Bruno at the Garden, and Vince Sr. with Monsoon with Gorilla, and Bugsy's taking all these bumps, taking really good bumps and everything. And Vince Sr. was to Monsoon was like, why doesn't the rest of our heels bump like that? And he's like, I don't know. And so Bruno really took a liking to him and really liked him and was like, listen, we got to get you out of here. I want to send you to Charlotte. Let's get you go to Charlotte for a while, then get you, go around the loop, and then we'll get you back up here. So he went to Vince Sr. and was like, hey, I want to send Bugsy to Charlotte. He's like, no, absolutely not. I'm not allowing that. He's like, well, if that's the case, then he's like, you need to make sure he makes some money. And he said this was 1969, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And he was making $800 or 70, something like that. He was making $800 a week, which is good. That's a, nice little, do the,
Probably $2,000 in today's money.
yeah. So he said the next week I got my pay. He said I got a $500 bump a week in my pay.
Wow.
He said just from Bruno telling Vince that you need to take care of him. So, but when he talked about Bruno, everything was with reverence, and he said Bruno was the man. He was a class act on everything. Had nothing but great things to say. He said, but Bruno really liked me, and he helped me all the time. So it was.
And of course, Buddy Rogers and Bruno were great rivals, enemies, hatred for each other. And
shoot.
Georgianne Macropolis was the only one, the president of Bruno's fan club, the president of Buddy Rogers' fan club. She was the only one, a great wrestling historian who passed away quite a few years ago now. But she was the only one to ever get them together for a picture, despite their hatred for each other. So it's, again, when things happen in the wrestling business, there is always a trickle-down effect. And when guys have earned reputations, a lot of times the people that are close with their adversary will enact on that, like, let's make sure that Buddy Rogers puts himself in a position in Florida to get himself fired as the booker. So you reap what you sow in this industry, and wrestlers not only have a long memory, but they also have a long memory of those who are influential or are held in reverence to them as well.
Right. Yep.
And that's fantastic. All right, so we got so much that we can dive into. Casey, as always, I love sitting under the learning tree and getting to hear the stories about generations past in professional wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you again. So for Casey Thompson, I'm Kevin Kelly, and we'll see you next week on the In Ring Wrestling Podcast.